Hello, everybody. Welcome to the FightFit Podcast. Got Johnny Scida on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming down, mate.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for inviting me along.
So, big promoter around Melbourne and also 5th degree black belt in Zen Do Kai. I'm really interested in that whole aspect of martial arts. Tell me a little bit about how you got started with Zen Do Kai.
I started with Zen Do Kai in 74
Mm.
in the Bruce Lee era, when Bruce Lee was big and we all go to the drive-in and watch it. And I've always liked martial arts or fighting and wrestling. And as a kid, all there really was boxing, bit of judo, bit of taekwondo. And then Bob Jones come along, and I went up into Elizabeth Street and I was hooked. I was probably 15. And the guys were just, beautiful geese, the way they carried themselves, not like the traditional karate guys, the big ugly geese. These guys had tailored geese,
Yeah, can't complain.
And it was, just flash, and it was tough. And
that's awesome.
yeah.
So for the viewers who might not know much about it, do you just want to give like a little bit of background about like the pioneers of that sort of side of martial arts?
Well, in those days when I was doing with Bob Jones and Richard Norton, would have there's probably about 80 students in each class because it was flying, and it was taken off really well. And then a small group of guys, Paul Fifield, Tony DiCasio, George Zachariah, all started doing kickboxing with the Lancianos, but they were in a separate little room. So me I look over, I was a brown belt, and I go, what's going on over there? And they go, they're all crazy kickboxers. Oh, what's kickboxing, So I went over there and I was hooked, and started doing a bit of training with those boys. And then we started Friday night's fight night at Bob Jones. You paid $5 to get in. If you fought, you got your $5 back.
I think Paul Fifield told me about that once.
Yeah,
Paul
fought them, and a few of the boys, that's where we cut our teeth.
Would you fight your mates, or would other people come in?
You'd fight other gyms, and you'd fight in-house too. There'd be, same guys, because there was no one else. Kickboxing, it started from nothing. I think it started in the US about 72, 73. And Joe Louis was the first American heavyweight kickboxer. And I remember Bob Jones was going to bring him out and do a massive show. And with I think it was Percy Lanciano was fighting Hector Penna, which was a big name in the day. And he didn't get on the plane. And they sent another guy over and ended up fighting a guy from Queensland. I can't remember his name, but it was great.
Percy did he win?
No, Percy fought Hector Penna and lost.
Oh, yeah.
Tight fight. But Joe Louis didn't. He didn't come.
Yeah.
But the other guy, he was American. He was big, and he just looked, for us, it was like, wow, look at these guys.
Yeah.
And it was just a fantastic era,
Do you have any particular memories of particular fight nights or particular fights that happened?
Yeah,
in particular, if you've got any about Paul, I'd love to hear those ones.
Well, Paul, as I heard last time on your podcast, he talked about fighting up in Perth. I remember that when he fought the Costello, I think his name was, the American, and he was supposed to be doing a demo with him, and Paul was the underdog, and Paul punched him up, and it was a good day. It was a good day, and I don't know why he didn't continue, because I think he could have gone a lot further. But in those days, it was Percy, and it was Frank Lanciano, his brother, who was actually my trainer. And as Dave said, he had 32 fights, he only lost one because he changed the rules and started fighting leg kicks. And that was a funny thing, because in the early days of kickboxing, you had to throw 8 kicks per round. So they had a kick counter. And every time you threw a kick, you'd turn it over. And if you didn't turn it over, you lost a point. So if you didn't throw a kick, even though you punched the other guy up, you lost. Even if the guy threw a few kicks. So it was very important for this kick counter to count the kicks. So the trainers like me would be looking over at the kick counter and going, he threw a kick, Because if he finished the fight and he hadn't thrown enough kicks, he lost the fight. And that was to stop the boxers from coming in, because boxers could handle the body kicks, so they could punch your head in with their hands. So we used to make them kick. And then when the leg kicks came in, that was the end of the boxers wanting to cross over, because it was too vicious.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, wouldn't the boxers... The reason why they don't do kickboxing is
they
because
don't like it, yeah.
the leg kicks
But when
are
it
just
was above
brutal.
waist, they sort of did all right. But I remember I was up at the Hombu, which was the main dojo in the city, and the American Marines came in, and half a dozen come upstairs to the Bob Jones Corporation. They all started kicking low, and we're like, well, but they can't kick high. Everyone kicks high. Bruce Lee kicks high. Everyone kicks high. If you can't kick high, you're no good. Anyway, these guys taught us a good lesson, yeah. And then the leg kicks came in, and all the checking and all that started, and a whole different ball game. So from kicking, and then punching, and then leg kicking, and then the Muay Thai started. And as you know, now it's into MMA, and who knows where it's going to go? Probably swords and back to swords and shields in the arena.
Jousting.
Yeah.
So did you have many of those $5 fights yourself?
Yeah, I had 2, I think, at the Hombu, and I've actually got the video somewhere.
Oh, really?
Paul was referee, and Percy was referee on one of the other ones. Yeah. It was a bit scary. You go up there and you'd pay your $5, and they'd match you up, and they'd say, "Oh, how tall are you? How high weight are you?" And you'd match you up on the day, and you'd jump in and go for it. I think we didn't have a doctor. We didn't have anything.
Yeah.
It's just
Paul told me a story about someone getting knocked out and then having to get dragged out by their feet and stuff.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Hilarious.
It would have been. Well, you see the Thais, someone gets knocked out, they start grabbing their hair and shaking their head, and they half kill them.
Get out. Next fight's got to come on.
Yeah, well, you get a bit like that.
Do you have any good stories about those $5 fights? Anything that particularly sticks out in your mind?
No, I just remember it was scary. Like anything, you had to put yourself out there to go in there. Once you said you're going to do it, all your mates said, "You're going to fight? You're really going to fight?" And it's like, yeah, I think I am. I put my name down, And it was never as bad as you thought it was after it. But I think George had a few, and Dave Hitchcock actually fought a couple. And another guy from that era, which was really tough, I remember, was Dave Berry. He was a tough old soul. He was one of the first kickboxers. He actually stepped in and did a demonstration with John Moncayo, who Dave was supposed to fight, but Dave, as you know, got injured.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Dave about that.
Yeah, and he jumped in and sparred him. And, for someone that actually didn't really spend that much time doing the kickboxing, he did really well. Australia's small amount of people, but we've always produced top-end people, for the small amount of people.
We've had awesome kickboxers.
Right through kickboxing, boxing, MMA. We seem to excel.
Yeah, it's a good point with our small population as well. We've had so many good fighters, in particular, guys that I've watched like John Wayne Parr, Jeff Fennick. I interviewed Barry Michael, and his fight with Lester Ellis is just
I've got that incredible on tape, and I show people that was the last 15 rounder in Australia, and it was a brutal fight, and it was toe to toe, and it was a war. And I show young blokes, and they go, "Wow!" And it's in black and white, and I go, "Yep, they were the days, mate." These guys weren't dancing around; they were actually trading for the whole 15 rounds. The first round was as hard as the first round. And Dave will tell you, not Dave, Barry will tell you that fight put him on the map. Lester probably should have taken that fight. His management should have probably said, "No, we're not going to fight you. We've got bigger fish to fry," and went overseas and made some money. But
so obviously you have seen pretty much all of the best fighters fight in Australia over the last few decades. Who would you say are your favourites or the best that you've seen in kickboxing, boxing, any sort of fight, any combat sports?
In Australia, well, Jeff Fennick has made a great name for himself, the Mauler. And I remember Lester in the day. Lester was a very classy fighter. He had great moves. He moved well. He did really well for himself. The other ones I really liked in the early days was I remember Dana Goodson, the late Dana Goodson. He was going to fight at Melbourne Town Hall, and he fought a guy called Lee Rice. He was a tall African. He was black as the ace of spades. He was magnificent build. And I was in the city and I saw him walking down the street. He had a girl on each arm. I don't know if it was they were doing it for the publicity, but he just looked, he stuck out. And on the night of the fight, they brought him into the ring in a coffin. So they carried him in a coffin.
It's a strange thing to do.
And they stood the coffin up and opened the door, and there's Lee Rice.
I think The Undertaker used to do that in the wrestling. That's a different story, yeah.
And he's got these full body gear on. You can see every muscle in his body. Then Dana came out, and he was a bit on the heavy side, and his pants were a bit high. And I'm like, geez, he's going to get killed. He's going to get killed. Anyway, he knocked this other guy. It was a classic. After I seen him, I said, "Mate, you did a great job."
Yeah.
You look fantastic. Yeah, it just shows you. It doesn't matter what you look like. It's all the experience. But that fight stuck in my head as a kid. I thought, geez, that was magnificent,
What was it like being around that as the sport was obviously growing? It was such an amazing time to be involved. What was it like to be around it?
Well, it was great, especially I really love the martial arts side of it, I still do, even though I don't put on the gi and do all that, but I really loved it, and that's where I started. And you always got to pay homage to where you started. A lot of people forget that, and they become their own men, and then you talk to them and say, where'd you start? Oh, I started myself. No one starts yourself. Everyone's born from somewhere. So you got to give credit to where you've come from. But, those early days of the kickboxing were exciting because there was a lot of people going from boxing to kickboxing. And then I remember Lester Ellis, he come to me, he wanted to kickbox. I said, what do you want to kickbox? He said, well, I've won world titles in boxing. I wouldn't mind. So I did a show. I ran a show out at, I think it was Keilor Basketball Stadium. No, it wasn't at Keilor. It was in St Albans somewhere. And he was the main event. And he fought kickboxing, done a good job, beat this kid from New Zealand. And then he had 2 or 3 fights, 1 or 2, or lost 2, and then retired. But yeah, he crossed over, and I remember he got in the ring, and I said, you got to take your shoes off. He goes, what do you mean you got to take your shoes off?
I didn't even know he did that.
I said, you can't fight with shoes on.
Yeah.
He said, I can't walk without them. But credit to him.
Yeah.
We did a good 6 months training, taught him basics, but he had good hands and had beautiful body rippers.
Why did he want to? He had great body shots. Why did he want to move to kickboxing?
He just thought it'd be something different, being a sportsman like he is. And
Interesting.
And he said, I wouldn't mind winning a world title. I said, we just can't win a world title. You got to go through you got to win a couple, and with your reputation and that, and I'm sure that we can get a crack at something. But Lester wanted it straight away, but it wasn't going to happen straight away. But it was a good experience training him, and
Yeah, you had trained so many awesome fighters over your time. Who would you say would be someone that really sticks out in your mind in terms of character?
Geez, a lot of them. Some of them are really good fighters. Some were high maintenance. Some are low maintenance. A couple of them. People ask me who was the best fighters you've ever had. Cenk Becky was one of he was very classy to watch and had a big heart, And then Anthony Vella was as tough as nails. He wasn't classy, but he just keep coming at you. Different fighter. And then, I had trained Chris Christopoulos as a heavyweight. And I remember he fought Maurice Smith. And Maurice Smith was undefeated in kickboxing for years and crossed the UFC.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Maurice. You know Maurice?
Yeah.
Anyway, so Maurice had retired, and I think Tarek brought him over to do a couple of seminars. And Chris was at the gym, and he just fought probably 2 months ago, and he was having a bit of a break, putting on a bit of weight. And Tarek rang me and goes, does Chris want to fight? And I said to Chris, do you want to fight? He goes, nah, not yet. And then he goes, who? And he goes, Maurice Smith. And he goes, Maurice Smith? I'm not fighting Maurice Smith. And I said, no, I don't think he's interested. And then Chris goes, how much are you offering? I said, how much? He goes, 6. And he goes, nah, kept skipping. And then he goes, 10. I go, 10. He goes, yep, we're doing it. And I think they only had 3 weeks to get ready.
3 weeks?
3 weeks.
After he'd been enjoying himself?
Yeah, and he just got back off holidays. And credit to Maurice, he'd been retired too, and he'd been out here doing seminars. It was only a 3-rounder. So next minute, we were at the stadium and we were fighting this legend of a guy. And we beat him on points. It was ecstatic,
It's funny how the world works sometimes.
Yeah, so when I remember I was over in Japan, and there was a whole lot of our UFC guys there were over there with that Hector Lombard, as I said before. And there was a lot of Americans there, and I was a kickboxing trainer, and they didn't really know much about me or care much about me. And I remember that I knew who Maurice Smith was, and we'd just been talking to a couple of the guys at breakfast. They said, oh, you need to train a couple of kickboxers. Yeah. I said, oh, we fought this guy. I can't remember. I think it was Maurice Smith. Oh, man. We went from here to here. They go, Maurice Smith? You fought Maurice Smith?
Yeah.
I felt like saying, yeah, but it was at the end of his career.
Yeah, don't mention
Doesn't
that.
matter. Don't mention nothing.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
No, good stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. So you've trained with some of the best. You've trained some of the best. And now you've obviously observed some of the best through promoting. Right now, do you keep a good sort of close eye on the Australian game and who's doing well?
Yeah, well, I know all the promoters in Melbourne, and around Australia. It's just grown. The sport's grown that big over the last 10, 15 years. It's crazy. The same recipe for shows, lights. You got to have the lights, you got to have the sound, you got to have good chord. Everything's got to be worked out nicely. Other than that, nothing's really changed. Smoke and mirrors, and there's a fight on, and people are loving it.
Yeah.
And as we were talking before, all this corporate boxing now, it's great because if you're a fighter and you've had 4 or 5 fights, your family comes to the first couple, then they get, we'll catch you on the 5th or 6th. But if you're doing a corporate fight and some kid's having his first fight, he's got his whole family and his second family, and everyone's coming to see him. So that's where you get your numbers from. And that's why, and it's good team building. It's something different. It's like people going, what would you do that for? What would you climb Mount Everest for? That's crazy too,
Yeah.
So
it's a great character, buddy. I mean, I told you before we started the podcast that I did the FightFit challenge, and I'd been training for 3-4 years before that, over in London, in Hackney, boxing over there. And then I never actually had a fight though. But I was just kind of really wanted to have a fight, and it was an awesome experience. It was unlike having an amateur fight though, because with an amateur fight, you probably have to train for longer.
Yes.
Really hone your skills a lot more. But with this fight, you get a much bigger crowd. You have all your mates coming. Everyone's having a piss up in the audience, and it's just an awesome night. But different kind of thing though, as you were alluding to.
Yeah, well, in boxing, you start off with your amateurs. You might have 10, 15, you might even have 100 amateurs, and you turn pro. And I remember in the early days, kickboxers would be fighting pro because there was no amateurs, and people would say, how many fights you had? I say, he's had 3. Yeah, but how many amateurs? None. What do you mean no amateurs? The boxers couldn't understand. How could you go from, it's like going to university without going to first school. But, that's the way our sport was. But now we have amateurs. So now guys are, clocking up numbers of fights and then stepping up into the pros. Yeah. Which is it's better. It's better for the sport. Because
the Australian amateur scene isn't as good for developing fighters as it maybe could be, in terms of they don't really get paid for their efforts. And
the amateurs?
Yeah.
No, the amateurs don't get paid. But, 15 years ago, I wanted a couple of my young boys to fight, my son and another young Jason I used to have. I wanted them to fight, but they were underage. So I'd take them to Sydney, take them to Queensland. They couldn't fight in Melbourne. But in Melbourne, you could box at the age of 12 with amateurs. So I campaigned with a couple of blokes and started the amateurs, the VAMA. And we started that probably 10 years ago. So now you've got amateur status, and I think the government's given a couple more licenses out for a couple other sanctioning bodies. So now we're under the wing of the government, and we can run amateur shows, and everything's got to be done above board, which is good. And it gives the kids, you're teaching at a school, and half your people are underage. So where's their outlet if they can't compete?
What do you think? Do you think that with the massive, obviously, growing sport that is all the different combat sports in terms of boxing and kickboxing and MMA, I think just with the commercial interest now that it's growing, it's obviously always been really popular, but it's just growing more because of the commercial interest. Do you think that there's a chance that the amateur sort of scene in Australia might eventually get much stronger, and that we could get people being paid for their efforts, and the Olympic sort of style amateurs?
Well, they're talking about bringing in Muay Thai as an Olympic sport, which will kick that along like they did with Taekwondo. And now in Queensland they do those trials when they go over to Thailand and fight for the Australian team, and that, which is good. It's like the swimming team going over with the boxing team. One day I'd love to have kickboxing, Muay Thai under the banner like boxing with BoxRec. How great's BoxRec? You can go on there, you can look back 50 years and see who fought. Awesome. There's no bullshit. That's what you did. There's no saying I had, because people have funny concept of memory. Yeah?
Selective memory, maybe.
All of a sudden they're 2 times world title champion, and I remember some guy coming to me and he said, "Listen, I trained with this guy up the road in Sunshine." And I said, "Oh, yeah?" I said, "Well, I know everyone in the sport." He goes, "Yeah, he's a world champion." I go, "He can't be." And they go, "What do you mean he can't be?" I said, "Well, I know everyone in the sport, and there's no one from Sunshine with a world title." And I said, "Ask him if he's got any videos or any pictures, And I didn't want to be nasty to the guy, but I felt like saying the guy's full of shit. You know, people just talk. And I tell people when they go to join a gym, do your homework. Check it out. When you take your car to get serviced, you don't just take it anywhere. You take it to someone recommended. Why would you take your body? And, you know, you're going to take yourself somewhere and you might train there and not like, well, the guy's he's full of crap. He's never done nothing.
10-time world champion in sunshine.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like when I interviewed Dave, you mentioned before the podcast started that you really love the fact that when we started the interview, he had to stop me and say, I'm not a world champion because I said that, and then he said, no, I'm not a world champion. But yeah, he was one of the first to fight for a world championship.
That's right. Well,
in Australia.
You know, I'm one of them where it is what it is. You know, don't put any mustard on it because it just.
Do you know how that works? Because he did win that fight, right? Or
Dave?
No, but he was meant to fight for the world championship, and then Paul Fifield had to take the fight for him. Am I wrong?
No, I think the world title fight was with John Moncayo.
Yeah.
And who fought John Moncayo? Chan Chuk Fei from Sydney took the fight.
Okay.
John Moncayo didn't knock him out. I think he did knock him out. But Dave was supposed to fight. But Dave went to Japan before that and fought a couple of times with Bob. Bob took him over. Him and Stretch Anderson in a day, they were boxers, and they came into the corporation and started teaching them hands, put the legs together because they were good boxers. They started doing really well. I think Dave fought George Zachariah in a day.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if that was
I think I remember him telling me a little bit about that.
But you know, he was one of the pioneers of the sport, Dave. You know, I remember him from a young bloke. He used to have a gym in South Melbourne in a car yard somewhere. And because I was training with Frank, and it was weird because Dave was training Frank and Frank was training me. So Frank used to come and Lanciano. So I'd go down there and train with Dave under Frank. And it's one of those things. You start with someone, you stick with them. You know what I mean? You get a rapport with your trainer.
What was Dave like as a youngster or as a younger man when he was fighting?
Dave, I remember watching very, very relaxed. I remember he was kickboxing at Melbourne Town Hall, and it was like slow motion. You know, when they get when you watch amateurs go, they sort of like in fifth gear, bum, 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 bum. They got out there and touched gloves and moving around, and me being a novice, I'm watching, geez, they're going slow. It doesn't look like a cracking egg the way they're throwing these punches. And it's just the timing. He just threw this left hook, caught the kid on the chin, knocked him out. And I go, Jesus Christ, see how it's done? Yeah, all that bravo, it doesn't work.
It's the thing I did notice about Dave is that he's just such a gentleman in real life as well that you wouldn't really pick it that he was such a good fighter and could do that in the ring. But yeah. So.
No, I spent time with Dave, went to Japan. He took... what was her name again? World champion?
Amanda Buchanan
over, and I took Laura Skinner. And we had a great trip. You know, that was a great trip.
Where was that?
We went to Japan. We fought in Tokyo Dome. It sounds good. We fought in Tokyo Dome because that's massive. But we fought in the room off the side of Tokyo Dome, which is about 3,000 people,
Still.
But it sounds good if you say Tokyo Dome.
Yeah.
But we're in the dome fighting.
Don't let the truth get in the way, as we said.
But it was a great trip, and we had fun. I remember she got cut. Amanda got cut really bad, lost the fight, and we brought her back home and stitched her up because they did a shit job over there.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought they would have had great facilities for it.
No, I think what happened was they didn't stitch her up, that's right, because we were coming home 2 days later, and I think Dave spoke to Peter Lewis, the doc, and he said, look, leave it. You can leave it a couple of days, bring it, which I didn't know. I thought you had to do it straight away. And we can stitch it up when we get back, which she did. But I think she's up in Queensland now running classes and PTs and doing real good for herself. She was a great girl.
Yeah, I spoke to her on the phone before I interviewed Dave Hedgecock on the podcast, and yeah, she had great things to say. Yeah, I'm hoping next time she's in Melbourne, she'll be able to come on the podcast. That'd be great.
Well, you know, girls are doing well. People used to say to me, "Do you train girls?" And I said, "No, I just train fighters." And I've never been one. Never looked for any girls. They just, if they come, and they're always special. The girls that fight, because you know, in the early days there was not much opportunity. They'd get 2-3 fights a year if they were lucky, where the guys are getting 4 or 5.
Changing now,
and they can fight. I remember in the early days, boxers didn't have girls fighting. And they used to say to me, being a martial artist, well, why would you teach girls? And I said, why not? You teach them self-defence, same thing. It's funny now, ironic now, that all those old boxers, they're all teaching girls now. And when I see them, I go, teaching a few girls now, are we? Oh, yeah. Someone had to break the ice.
Mm. So you never really had a problem with that at all?
No, I just trained them like they were training the guys. And if they did well, they're always light, 50 kilos, 57 kilos. Not very powerful, but I'm saying not powerful because I'm used to holding for big blokes. When the girls are hitting the pads, it's not like... but when they're hitting their own weight division. And I remember asking someone, they said to me, what's the difference with the weight? I said, mate, a couple of kilos in the lightweight's very important. As you get up to the 80, 85, 5 kilo spread's no big deal. But when you're down 52, 53, if you're giving away 2 or 3 kilos, that's a big difference. And I remember someone saying, well, what do you mean? I said, well, put a kilo weight in a sock and smack someone over there to see how that feels, yeah? I said, there's a kilo there. I said, it makes a big difference. And they go, yeah, true.
That's a really good way to think about it, actually. Yeah. When you look at people going up weight divisions and you're thinking it's only from, it's only 5 kilos. What's the big difference? But it is huge.
The culture of the kickboxing now and the Muay Thai, and people get confused. Kickboxing and Muay Thai, they're both different sports, but they all come from the same thing. Like we all come from boxing, kickboxing, martial arts, just a progression. You got people that love Muay Thai. You got people kickboxing in Melbourne. It's still around. Queensland, I don't think there is any more kickboxing. A few of the other states, it sort of died off. But in the States, it's still big. And that's where it didn't start from there, but it's a progression from it. I always tell people, if you like fighting art, you like boxing, you like kickboxing, you like Muay Thai, they're all very similar,
What was your sort of style as a fighter? How would you have described yourself, or how would Coach describe you?
I was fit and aggressive. Yeah, I trained.
So you relied on like cardio and stuff? You trained really hard?
I trained too hard. Actually, I didn't even know what burnout was, but I learnt. I remember going to the doctor every time before I fought, and I'd have the flu, and he'd be sick, and I said, but I'm training so hard. And he said, yeah, well, you're training too hard. And I said, what do you mean? I was that scared I was going to lose. I'd run extra. I'd train extra and didn't realise. And I remember someone telling me, you got to have 2 days off out of the 7. You should rest or do something else. Do another sport, go swimming or do something else. And they were right, because if you're just doing it day and day and day, your body rejects it.
And what sessions, when we're talking about a day of training, we're not talking about like a half an hour class or something. It's probably really...
No, I remember when I was getting ready for my second dan, which is a big thing in martial arts, a 30 round of sparring. And we were doing
30 rounds of sparring.
30 rounds of sparring, and it was change partner every 2 minutes. So there's no break till the 25th round. You got a 5-minute break.
Oh my God!
And it was hard. So you train super hard. I remember hitting the bag for an hour. So I'd set the clock and just punch the bag, no stop for 1 hour, or kick, punch the bag. Yeah. So that was my preparation. Kick and punch the bag. Skip for half an hour. So there's an hour and a half punching and skipping, and then running, and then weights at the end, but sharp, fast weights, the light weights. So I was doing all that.
So we're talking 3-4 hours is a session.
Well, I'd do 3 hours.
Wow.
And sometimes train the morning, train the night. Yeah. But I overtrained. That's what and I remember when I was going for the grading, I got up to the 8th round, and I'm going to blitz this. Yeah, I'm going to blitz it. I hit the wall. I thought I'd said I'm done. I'm running out of gas. I got a second wind. By the 25th round, I reckon I could have done another 10. And that's why you learn from. Do
you reckon you just got into that much of a flow state that you were just in that rhythm and you could just keep going?
That's how it works. People don't realise. I remember saying to Dave, "How do you do an 8-rounder?" Dave was fighting 8-rounders, and I'm doing 3s, and I'm training. I can't train any harder. I'm as fit as I've ever been. How do you get any fitter? And he said to me, "It's all in your head." And I didn't know what he meant, but he's right. And after I finished fighting and I was training fighters, I could do 10 rounds sparring with the boys. There's not as much pressure because you're not in a stadium. There's no one watching you. So you go, how come I can do 10 rounds, 10 threes, no problem. But when you're fighting, you're gassing after the first. It's a build-up of the pressure. it's a whole different ball game, you know.
Yeah.
So you learn from your experiences, and that's why people there's good trainers out there that haven't fought, but you need experience. So for me, I always say if you've got a trainer that's fought, he can pass that experience on. I don't like when I see some trainer yelling at some kid, dig deep, you know, dig deep, you know. Did you ever dig deep? You know what I mean? You've got to be there to do it. That's how...
I guess that practical experience of having to really switch on that mental side of things is so important.
Well, it's like when I used to teach classes. Whatever they did, I did. I didn't ask them to do anything I couldn't do. As I got older, in the last 10, 20 years, I just talk now. I don't actually do it. But in the early days, if I said do 20 push-ups, I'm doing 25 because I want to impress the class and show them what I can do. So same with fighting. You know, if you've got a trainer that's fought, it gives them a bit more credibility. But in saying that, there is some good trainers out there that produce fighters because they've got the knowledge, you know. But I don't know if I could work it out, I would, but I can't.
But do you have a particular memory of like a fight that sticks out for you, like one of your fights that was particularly memorable?
I didn't fight much. I had 3 fights, 3 wins, and I was supposed to fight for the title a couple of times, and there was not many people around at that time fighting, and every time I got ready for the fight, the guy cancelled. Once it was at Festival Hall or Melbourne Town Hall. I walked in, the title belt's on the ring. The guy walks in on crutches.
No,
I've got my family and friends there. I'm shattered. After the 3rd one, I'm out of here. I don't want to do it. That was over a good 12-month period. So preparation, and you know, I was married, had kids, working shift work, plus doing martial arts. And that was a funny thing. In the day, I was getting ready for my 4th Dan.
So Dan and degree, that's the same thing, is it?
Yeah, well, it's black belt.
Excuse my naivety.
Then 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, you know, it goes up to whatever you want it to. But in those days, people used to say, oh, you can't do both. I'd say, why? You can play cricket one day, football the next. What's the difference? So I won my fight and I got my degree. So I tell young people, especially in the early days, boxing trainers used to say, oh, you can't, boxing stance is different, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, you just switch over. You know, if you're an athlete, you can do, and if you learn the skills, you can do it. It's not a problem. But yeah, a lot of people used to say, oh, those kickboxers got a different stance, you can tell.
Is there like a grading process for every single Dan? Because you said 30 rounds of sparring for second Dan.
That's for your 2nd Dan. That was.
And does it get harder?
No, that's the funny.
I hope not.
No, it doesn't get harder. You start from white belt, you progress up. A lot of people, you know, you get like 20% staying, all the rest would leave. So you'd start off 80 in a class. By the time I went for black, there was 3 of us out of 80. And I think there was Frank Lanciano. No, there was Percy Lanciano, Frank de Blasi and myself. And the thing is, after you get your black belt, you're actually starting from the beginning. It's like you've started from the beginning. You've done about 2-3 years training. And then you do your physical one, which is the 2nd Dan. That's like your blood grading. That's like your warrior. You know, you have to be a tough bastard to do that grading. And then the next one's more philosophy, weapons, and it gets softer. It doesn't get harder. So you've sort of built up.
I guess you wouldn't really have that much after a 3rd, 4th Dan. You wouldn't have too much to prove still, would you?
Well, yeah, that's right. Once you've done your 2nd Dan, you've sort of moved on, and then you go into the teaching part of it and progressing and building your club. And
it's interesting about the philosophy of it. What does that sort of entail?
What's that?
The philosophy side of things.
Well, you know, in boxing, if you fight, you retire. What do you do after that? Martial arts, you don't retire. As you get older, you keep training, but the intensity gets less because your body can't handle it, but your brain's still working. And so that's why I like the martial arts part of it. You can continue doing it in your 60s and 70s and 80s. Boxers, well, once you're finished, unless you open a gym or you start teaching. And that's the way it's always been. So
it's the way of sort of transitioning later into life and sort of staying a student of the discipline, I guess you'd call it. Yeah, and people love it. You know, they continue doing it. If you look at the martial arts schools around, you know, there's hundreds of students running around their geese. It's great. I reckon they should bring compulsory into school, some sort of self-defence. Yeah.
You know, it'd be fantastic. When I first started and I was going to school, I'm short and I've always been short. And people used to say, did you get picked on? I didn't, because I was always into some sort of martial arts, and people knew that, and bullies are scared of the unknown, so they wouldn't pick on me. They thought, geez, he must be able to fight because they've heard the stories.
There was always a few kids at school who knew, who was like, oh, that guy's a black belt in karate, or that guy's done a few boxing amateur fights. Don't pick on him. Doesn't matter how big he is.
The bullies don't want to pick on anything that might come back at them. Yeah, they pick on the kid that they think can't fight. So I reckon if everyone learnt it a little bit.
And there's a particular sense of self that you get from that, in my opinion. Of somebody who's practiced martial arts, they have a bit more self-control and a bit more, as you said, the philosophy of it as well.
100%.
Discipline, and there's a different sort of aura about somebody who does martial arts, in my opinion.
Well, it is, and you can, most of the guys go in, they train super hard, they go home, they don't want to fight. They're on their way home from the gym, someone bips their horn, they just wave, mate, I'm buggered, I've just done 10 rounds, I'm not going to get out and punch you. But the guy that's come home from work, he's got the stress and the weight of the world, someone bips, he wants to get out and kill him because he's got no release. And that's why I think that martial arts should have been... I used to go out and do a lot of schools, and my first introduction when I was at school in Form 1 was Bob Jones come out to the school and did a demonstration. I was hooked. And, at that age, you're very acceptable to things that you see.
Yeah, you'd be a sponge of that.
A sponge, And that took me into that direction. To tell you the truth, it kept me out of a lot of trouble. Because a lot of the guys I was hanging with, of an evening, they'd be out doing stupid things. I was at the gym. And they'd go, come on. I go, no, I've got to go to the gym. I've got to... In those days, I used to go Monday to Friday into the city, catch a train, and Saturdays train in the park. So I was dedicated. And you travel... an hour, 2 hours to go training. These days, I have people ringing me up and going, where's your gym? And then I tell them. And I said, where do you live? And they tell me, and they say, oh, have you got anything closer? They're 2 suburbs away. I go, how close do you want us to get? You want to build a gym next to your house? People are lazy now, man. They don't want to go nowhere. And there's too many options. There's gyms everywhere. Yeah,
that's just... I guess you do the discipline side of things, and that becomes so important after a while. I remember my coach in London, and he was pretty much like a father figure to me over in London, and I would never ever miss a training. Like even when it would snow, I'd be on my push bike in my trackies with my wet trackies and wet socks riding to training. And
you don't want to let them down.
You can't let them down. It's not an option.
I remember when I think I was 20, I got married, 21, and I stopped training for a couple of years. I was looking for work and just change of life. Well, I missed it. And I remember going in the city and seeing some of the boys from the gym, and I hid. I was embarrassed. It was like, why am I embarrassed? Because I'm not going to the gym.
Can't lie to yourself. You can't fool anyone.
Yeah, and it was like, and then I started training for a couple of people in the backyard, blah, blah, blah. And then I was back in again, and I never left it. So I've been doing it all my life.
I think also you'd be able to attest to that. A lot of martial artists don't get in fights outside of the gym as well, real martial artists, because those guys like yourself would understand the damage you can inflict on somebody by fighting. The mechanical of what fighting is and what you can do and how much you can hurt somebody.
That's right, and you think different as well. You think to yourself, you don't want to be throwing punches. You end up in trouble
unless you have to.
Unless you have to. I always tell people it's like insurance. You pay your house insurance. Hope your house never burns down, but if it does, you got insurance. I tell people, you bring the kid here, they're going to get fit. You're going to be with good people, and worst scenario, they get into a fight, at least they can throw a 1-2.
Exactly.
Well, that's what got me into sport when I was 12. I went to the swimming pool with a mate of mine who was a bit bigger than me, and this kid picked on him, and I went up to him and said, mate, pick on someone your own size. And he hit me for 1-2, and I was on the ground. I was 12, and I got up and I found out he was from a boxing family from Braybrook. And that was it. I'm off to the boxing gym after that. And I went and started training with Maxie Bowman, who was a bit of a legend in the TV ringside days.
Nice.
And I was training there for a bit, but I really wanted to do martial arts, but there was nowhere to do it. And I went to comps in Footscray. They were doing judo, and it wasn't my cup of tea, And then I ended up going to the Bob Jones Corporation. It's funny how if you want something, you'll find it, And I just loved it, and it's been a big part of your life. Most people are involved in sports. It is a big part of their life. I always look at people's Facebook. If they're involved in a sport, that's their main photos is if they're boxer or kickboxer or cricketer. their sport's a big part of their life.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which is a good thing. you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a positive thing, productive thing as well.
100%.
So what are you up to at the moment? What are you doing?
Well, I'm still running shows. I've been running shows for 25 years in the western suburbs. And the reason I started running shows is my fighters needed fights and there was nowhere to put them. So I thought I'll do a show. Hired a ring, got a venue, and I was doing it to get the boys fights. I wasn't making much money at all. And in those days, I was running the police gym in Sunshine. I think it was $1 donation to come in, and you'd pay $1 to train, and then after training, I'd do my classes where I made a couple of dollars. So it was never money motivated. For probably 20, 30 years, never made $1. But I was always working, but I loved it. And eventually I left where I was working, and that's all I've been doing now, running the gym. I have a small gym.
Where can people find you if they do want to come in?
I'm out at St Albans, always been in the western suburbs. I was in Sunshine for a long time. I moved around a lot of gyms, but now I have a place that I can call home where I train from. My son got involved in it.
What's the gym called in case people want to look it up?
It's Ultimate.
Ultimate Gym.
We have another one in Hoppers Crossing and one in Geelong and one in Bacchus Marsh. And these guys are ex-fighters and they've opened up a franchise, part of the Team Ultimate. So the boys fight under their own gym, but under our banner. And we match them on our shows. We try and build them up. So I'll build you up. And then when you get to a point where I can't handle you anymore, I'll pass you on to the bigger promoters. So it's a good stepping stone. Someone has to do that early starts, like amateurs to pros. If no one runs the small shows, then there's no one going to fight on the big shows.
Yeah, exactly. Have you had many fighters that are doing quite well now come through your shows?
Yeah, we've got a few young kids coming through at the moment. We've got Joe DeMacaulay, one of my partners. He's got a kid, Mark Kassab. He's a boxer. He's 10-0 at the moment.
Nice.
In the boxing, to get 10-0 is a big thing. And he's a young fighter on his way up. He can be anything, like most of them. And I get guys that come in that train twice as hard as other guys, but never going to make it, and guys that don't train much that can make it. And it's the old thing, you need it all to line up. The sun and the moon and the stars, all to line up to get that guy that's going to be the next best thing, Everyone wants to be the best trainer and train the best fighters. I tell people it's about the person. You could have 10 people stand in front of me and I train them all the same, and one of them's a superstar and the other 9 aren't. Why is that? Because I'm a shit trainer? No. It's because one of them's a superstar. If he took cricket, football, or whatever he took up, he was going to be good at it. So it's up to the individual.
Yeah.
You champions walk in your gym.
So someone who's talented, tough, hardworking.
They're going to make it. And you need a basic understanding of training. Everyone has their own theory on how pads should work, and everyone tries to invent the wheel. We're doing this cross-training now. And I always tell people, well, I don't remember Ali doing any of that stuff, You just run, hit the bag, spar,
Yeah.
And we're all talking about him now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, all these things, you go to these gyms now, it's fantastic, beautiful rings, beautiful setup. My first gym was in my backyard, The first speed ball we had was a soccer ball with a bladder, blew it up and used the soccer ball. And our first punching, we never even had a punching bag. We used to just shadow box, But it's like anything. If you love it enough, you can... you need good trainers. I always tell, if you get a good trainer that knows his stuff, he can push the boys a bit further,
Yeah.
And that's all experience.
I think that's a really good segue into... I always like to finish these things with like a little bit of sort of philosophy, about your philosophy. So if you could give people a little bit of advice who are coming up trying to be fighters, what would be the best piece of advice that you feel you could give?
Well, I have people come in my gym and say, I want to fight. How much do you get paid? I said, don't even ask. You're in the wrong place, mate. If you're after money, go get a job and work overtime. You'll make good money. I said, if you come in and love the sport and train for it, and hopefully at the end of the rainbow, you make some money. So, I always tell young blokes at my gym, treat everyone the same. Treat everyone like gold. I said, if you're going to pick on people, pick on everyone. Don't be selective, yeah? If you're a crazy bastard and you pick on everyone, I'll respect that. But if you pick on certain people and not other people, well, straight away you go to the bottom of the barrel. I said, tell everyone, just be nice to everyone, because everyone deserves to be treated, you know. Everyone has their own baggage to carry. And some people, I'll have people at the gym go, who's that goose? I go, what goose? You don't even know him. I said, he just walked in the gym. I said, that guy could be anybody or could be nobody. Who cares? So I try to pass that on to my students, and hopefully they follow that code, yeah.
I love that piece of advice. I absolutely love that, because you definitely have that competitive nature in a gym, and to sort of break down that wall a little bit and to not judge people and not to get really competitive to people, but rather embrace people is an awesome piece of advice.
No, well, you know, boys come down to spar from other gyms like we do. I treat them like my boys. If they're punching up my boy, I tell them to pull up, or vice versa. I never bring them in and get them punched up and then go, look what we did, you know. That's just bad character, you know. And then guys will come back and go, that was a good gym. I went there without my trainer and they looked after me. In the old days, that probably didn't happen. You go to a gym, they'd punch you up good and proper, which we probably did a bit in the early days, but I've learnt over the years, treat everyone nice, and, you know, you don't have to win every sparring session. I tell the boys, just spar as best you can, good day, bad day. And on the day of the fight, if you go out and lose, we both lose. If we both win, we both win, yeah? So that's very important too. It's a team effort. But when you step out in that ring, you're by yourself. It's not like football. You can go, oh, yeah, no one else, the other team players didn't put in today. It's all about you. Yeah. So I've always been a bit of not a team player. That's probably why I like this sport, because it's just you, no one else, you know, in the ring. And in the training, it's all about you doing everything. But everyone's different, I suppose.
Well, mate, thank you so much for coming in and sparing some time for us today.
No problem.
I really appreciate it. I've had a good time. And I love to draw these things out as opposed to having one really long one. And I'd love to get you in 2 or 3 times to really get into the details of your story as well. So thank you, John.
No, it was good fun. Thanks very much, brother.
Thank you very much.
Oh, mate.